Are you solving for survival or freedom? I've realized how often my mind defaults towards solving short term problems. Problems like how to get more done today, how to make more money this month, how to get in better shape or get stronger in the gym, and pretty much trying to solve what's in front of me, trying to fix this current situation. And it's not that these things aren't important, but it's that they all come from the same place. They're all from survival. They're all from avoiding discomfort and getting me out of this current situation, which is often around fixing something or solving a short-term problem. Now, it got me thinking about how the mind is always in this mode of solving something. And if we're not careful, we'll always end up in loops of solving petty, short-term problems that don't really lead anywhere long-term. All right, for myself, when I'm solving these short-term problems, it just becomes a recurring thing. I solve it one week, and then I'm going to solve it the next week, and I don't actually get past that problem. So it got me thinking about my relationship with money early on in my life and my early years where I had real bad money problems. I graduated from university, I was in a lot of debt, I was super broke, maxed out all my overdrafts, and I got to the point where I was like, right, Adam, you need to fix your money problem. And for me, that meant earn enough to pay the bills, support myself, and to clear some of my debts that I currently had. So I went on my pursuit to do that. And I went to Thailand with some friends and became a poker player, which is not the traditional path, but that was my way of trying to solve my money problem. And I did enjoy poker early on, but a lot of it, the drive to get good at poker was make money, to pay the bills, to support myself. And over a few years, I was able to do that. I got to the point where I could live freely. I had covered all my bills and debts. And from the outside, at least from what I thought, I should have solved my money problems. But weirdly, my money problems didn't go away. I had a little bit of a buffer before I felt the pain of debt or not being able to pay bills, but I still worried about money month to month. I still tried to make as much as I could to support my living costs and to cover my day-to-day living. I still very much thought short-term around, I need money, got to make money to do these things. Very much in this survival lens, make money to survive. Now, it wasn't until I got to around 30 that I started to change the problem I was solving and to think about money more from a long-term lens of what am I trying to do with it. So that's when I started to think about what would it be like to not have money problems? How much money would I need? What would I have to do with money in order to create maybe income streams that could support me over the long term? This sent me down a big rabbit hole, and I remember reading the book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, great book title, and really going into how to create passive income and invest your money basically into assets that work for you over time. And for me, I wasn't doing this. I was making lots of money, but I wasn't thinking about what am I trying to do with it. I was almost like hoarding money and not really sure what the long-term play was. I was solving a short-term problem. I then remember learning about the FIRE movement, which is financially independent, retired early. These guys save so much of what they make. They save like 50 to 75% of their earnings and they invest it. And a lot of them retire in their early 30s. And it's a very different mindset. They're not solving the how to pay the bills problem. They're solving the how do I not work again problem. How do I have enough money to cover my living costs? And if you don't like your job and your job's hopefully well paying, you can play the game of let's retire from this job as early as possible. So they play that game. And they were really solving for the long-term solution of never having a money problem again. And it got me thinking about how often we try to solve the short-term problem reactively, whereas really what we want to solve is the long-term problem proactively. So a different example that comes to mind from my life is my approach to health. Also, we all have a health problem in terms of trying to keep ourselves healthy. I've always viewed my health from a long-term lens. And from an early age, I've been training for about the past 25 years. I've probably been training 3 to 5 times a week on average. Even in my early 20s, late teen years, where I was drinking a lot and living quite recklessly, I was still training 4 or 5 times a week and looking after my body. I've realized from a fairly young age, and I've kept that mindset that I want to be fit, I want to be healthy, I want to feel good in my body. And as I start to age, I want to be able to do everything I want with my body. And I want to have the energy to move around, and I don't want to be fragile or feel like I can't do things. So I've always invested in my health. I've always eaten well. I recover well. And I try to invest in a long-term solution. So with my health, I'm doing a good job. I'm win a long-term game. But even with that, very recently, I picked up a lower back injury. And it's very tempting for me to solve the short-term problem. Get rid of the pain so I can get back lifting and it goes away. But when I really stop and reflect, what I want to do with the current injury I have is solve the long-term problem. I don't want this to come back in 6 weeks' time or 2 months' time. I hear many people who have recurring injuries of back, shoulders, and I don't want that. So rather than solving the short-term problem of removing pain, removing discomfort, I want to give my mind the job of solving it long-term. And the long-term solution is build a bulletproof back that doesn't get injured, that can deal with all the demands of life training that I put it through. Very different problem. How do I build a bulletproof back so I never get injured, rather than how do I remove this back pain? One has me seeing a physio, having a few massages. Another might have me design a whole training program for 3 to 6 months to really build strength in that area. So it got me thinking like a lot about the difference between reacting to short-term problems, which we often spend a lot of our time doing, and proactively solving long-term problems. And we really need to switch to that different game, if I could call it that, the game of trying to solve things fully. Because I realize for myself, if I don't think about the long-term games I'm playing, and if I don't try to proactively solve them, I'm always stuck in this reactive loop. And I say reactive loop because it works in the way of, I feel discomfort, I solve this problem goes away, but then it comes back again. It's almost like you can imagine it with your finances is a good example. You spend your money that month, and then the next month you make more money to spend it again on some level. But if you think about the long-term game, even if the games we all play similar games. We play the money game, we play the health game, we play the relationship game, we play the happiness game. Game being a term used to mean something that we're trying to do well at, get better at. We're opted in by default for these games. We've got to think about what is the long-term outcome of this game that I want. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in one go. You don't say, I'm going to learn how to solve all my money problems, and then all of a sudden, you've got no money problems. It takes a long time to solve these. Myself, even when I started thinking about solving the long-term money problem, took years before I had passive investments. Took years before I was in a position to save enough to actually have meaningful contributions in my life. Even with health, you start thinking about being healthy long-term. It's daily, weekly investments, but over a long period of time. But the main thing I want to get through with this video is question what problems you're giving your mind to solve. If you don't know the answer to that, and you haven't given it clear long-term problems, you'll be solving short-term problems reactively. Nothing wrong with that in the short term, but it is a cycle that just keeps repeating. And I know this for myself because I've done it many, many times. But when I think of a long-term goal, a long-term solution, probably to the same problems, most of the problems I'm looking at a short-term lens. If I just look at it from a long-term lens that I could solve this problem for good, very quickly, my mind plays a different game. And all of a sudden now I'm thinking on how I can literally free myself from this problem. So this video came to me in terms of solving for survival or solving for freedom. Survival, short-term, reactive, whereas freedom is long-term and proactive. So think about the games you're playing, think about the problems you're solving, and try and shift yourself towards a long-term lens.